welcome to Quarantine Break. I'm Kiana, founder of Eat Soccer, and we're so pleased to have you. Today, the title of our 1 o'clock session is Today's Pretend Job, and we're so pleased to have with us actor, producer, director, Issac J. Connor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi everybody. Hi, Kiana.
So what sparked your interest in becoming an actor?
Okay. Well, I've always been a performer my entire life. From the time I could crawl, it's just something I'm made as. But it wasn't until I moved to the East Coast to be closer to family after the death of my mom that I kind of had just like put my hands up and just said, whatever the thing that I call God, whatever you want me to do, let's just do that. And because doing my own thing was kind of not leading me in the direction I wanted. So I moved to a small town in Pennsylvania called Williamsport because my little brother was there, and my other parts of my stepdad, my other younger brother, they live in York, Pennsylvania. So basically my options were live in redneck Mecca of York or live in redneck Mecca with art of Williamsport. So I chose art. And it has a nice burgeoning artistic community that my little brother was already plugged into, and therefore I was plugged into when I would come back for the holidays. So when I moved there, I started building a community radio station at the behest of some of the community because I was trying to get my show onto a station, and they said, well, we're trying to build this station, and then very quickly they kind of decided I should take over the building of it, which was not something I was trying to do at all. That turned into me founding a burlesque troupe as a fundraiser for the station to get me the antenna money that I needed. And so all through this process of, being a public speaker, and I was in management before, and now I'm building a station and I've got a troupe of artists, everybody just kind of saw me as an actor. And there was one guy that came to a lot of my shows named Tom. He's an amazing director. I ended up working with him as an actor. And he called me an actor in conversation once. I was like, I'm not an actor. And then after I did my swan song from burlesque, this big burlesque and carny festival, my friend Bob, who was helping with building set design, he said, hey, if you're tired of being in charge of stuff, because I was, I'm building a community building a community theater, and you could just come be an actor. And I said, but I'm not an actor. Yes, you are. You just don't know it. So does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you just kind of acting found you and just put its, claim on you before you actually started to embrace the journey of being an actor.
I would say, yeah.
What types of training have you participated in to further your development in the acting industry? Or acting,
well, similarly, the training found me before I looked for the training. I worked at a theme restaurant back home in San Diego called Dick's Last Resort, and there's about 10 of them throughout the country. So they're a theme restaurant where you treat the guests rudely, and it is the most fun until acting that I had ever had at a job in my life. But every single night is improv. It's because basically what happens is people come in and you put them in one of 3 categories mentally. Number one, they're people who have been to Dick's Last Resort before. They know how rowdy and rude it is, and they're ready to play and have fun. And they sit down and they go, we're going to get some effing service here or what? And they're just ready to play. Number 2 are people that are aware of Dick's Last Resort, but they've never been there before. So they're kind of looking around and being entertained, but they're not sure if they want you to entertain them. And number 3 were people that had no idea what they were walking into at all. And you had to be careful with them because you didn't want them to leave. But being in that scenario every single day, you are thrown with all kinds of stuff that you just have to immediately respond to. And you end up becoming really good at short-term improv. So later when I started community theater, which is what I would say was the best training I've had, you can work with all different levels of talent, of director, actor, different scenarios, different situations, different people, different types of actors. That's a great training. Just being immersed in that world, learning how to study a script, how to memorize a script, how to get no direction but still give your best, how to get direction and follow it. So the improv training at Dick's, the community theater training, and then I took voice lessons from an incredible vocalist, one of the best I've ever heard in my entire life. He trained me for about 3 or 4 years. His name is Nate. And other than that, it's just been like hands-on because I'm kind of an autodidact. So I teach myself stuff, but the reality is you never learn anything on your own. You're always pulling from other people. So I guess that's the long version of that answer.
So what are some of your special talents that you feel you bring to the table as an actor? I know some people can do special dialects
Mm.
or other things. So what are some of the talents that you've developed to be able to make yourself stand apart from the pack?
That's a good question because being in New York, you are shoulder to shoulder with people who have sometimes vastly more talent than you do. There's, there are triple threats out here where they're amazing singers, amazing dancers, amazing actors, and also people like me who are director, producer actors. So there's a lot of that. So because my parents moved me around the country most of my life, and I have certain spots that I consider home, like most of my childhood was Oregon, most of my young adult life was California, etc. I've pulled and kind of soaked in a lot of these different, there's the Georgia accent, and then there's the, Texan accent. It's a little bit more like, but there's like, you find that there are these draws and they're just become part of you once you tap into them. But to do them well, you need to get training. And I would say that I still am in need of some real good training with specific dialects. Like in the UK, there are so many that you can do the Hollywood version, which is not really authentic, or you can study, get acting dialect coaches to help you along. So that's probably the next phase of my dialect game. But what I bring to the table is just kind of a natural ability with regard to some dialects. And also, I guess I skipped in my training. I had a Meisner masterclass. And so in Meisner, it's more of an inside out. So you learn to, whatever your character is going through, you find that in your own life. This is not the Meisner technique, but it's the understanding of it. And you put your truth into that world. The technique itself is actually just learning how to listen and respond, because if you don't know how to do that, you'll never act. I mean, so yeah, so what I bring is like a real appreciation of the Meisner technique and the dialects, and just honesty, because if you're going to be an actor, you have to be honest with yourself. It's like life. You have to be honest with yourself before you're honest with anybody else. Because if you're not honest with yourself, you're not being honest with anybody else. So that's good acting, I think.
Now, I know I'm assuming to be a good actor, you have to memorize your lines. What are the techniques that you use to memorize things? And I know that you pride yourself on memorizing things quickly. So what are some of your tips?
Yeah, so I am a quick study. That's what we call it. So it's kind of difficult. Like I have a friend named Jove who's an actor and runs a community theater in Pennsylvania. He and I both are able to memorize things very quickly. Neither one of us have a photographic memory, but we do memorize quickly. So the way that I do it is, the first thing I do is I memorize all of my lines. I put a beat in between when there's, when I have a dialogue with someone. With a monologue, you don't have to worry about that. But since most things I'm doing are dialogues, I memorize my lines with a little beat between them first. Then I memorize my cues. And then because I'm a techie, I will often record the read through, because initially you sit down at a table and everybody reads the play together or the script together. I will record that and then insert my actors, my acting partner's cues into another file that has me. So I'll have the read through, I'll edit out all of my lines, and I'll just leave the cues. And so then I have that on hand. When I'm ready to memorize cues, I just press play. And while I'm on the train, whatever, I say my thing out in my head, or if I'm in New York and on the street, I don't worry about it because everybody looks like they're crazy. So I just say it out loud. And yeah, so that's really all I do. But I know a lot of people use like a scene, what's it called? Scene Buddy or Scene Partner. There are different apps you can use. I just don't need them. I know I have my thing, and that's what you. The more you do it, the more you do anything, you kind of develop your own thing. And so with acting, I know me. I know how I work. So this is what I've learned to do.
How long did you work before you received what you would consider your first big opportunity in acting?
That's an interesting question because, you know, you know who Elizabeth Shue is?
Yes.
So, you know, she was in the 80s, she was in movies, she ended up in The Karate Kid. That was probably what she would call her big break if you were to ask her. But I read something from her recently. And she said after she did what was it called? Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas Cage.
Hmm.
So she played a prostitute. He played an alcoholic. Both of them basically were trying to kill themselves. He was literally trying to kill himself with alcohol. She, by being in denial about what her occupation was doing to her physically and emotionally. And she said, you know, after leaving Las Vegas, which was lauded across the board by everybody everywhere, everybody said she had an amazing performance. She thought, finally, my big break. Not Karate Kid, but leaving Las Vegas. And she said, but the thing is, there's never this big break. Like you just constantly have to keep at it. There are certainly things that help you get more doors open. So for me, like, I've been professionally acting since January of 2016. So I'm in my 4th year now. So, I mean, you know, there are 1.5 professional theaters back in Pennsylvania where I was living. So there's a summer stock and then a rep theater. I started rehearsals for the Diary of Anne Frank with the one rep theater, but had to drop out. And I did one show with the summer stock theater. So you could say, well, those are my first professional theater gigs. So that was a big break.
Hmm.
Was it? I don't know. And then I got some TV shows and some movies. And then I come to New York and you could say, well, my first New York gigs, those got to be the big break, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's really a big break. And I mean, if there were a big break at this point, Kiana, I think you would probably have had to talk to about 8 people before you could even speak to me if I had achieved some big break, you know. Let me see what Mr. Connor's schedule is like on the 4th Sunday, you know. I mean, I don't think I've had a big break yet. But I certainly have had springboard opportunities.
What are some of the strategies that you use to create opportunities for yourself?
A lot of strategies. So I made a meme once that was a picture of a woman on a unicycle juggling while she was on a tightrope. And the things she was juggling, I ended up making all of the things that we actors have to do, which are, you know, study the script, go to rehearsal, have one or more survival gigs, try to make sure your family knows they still care about you and that you exist. Like there was like 20 different things. So what I do to keep my opportunities, you know, until recent events, my everyday on my phone, at some point, multiple times through the day, I would check these things, and I had to write them down just to remember what most of them were. So there's my actor platforms like Backstage, Actors Access, casting networks. Then there are a number of Facebook groups that I'm a part of. One of them is NYC Casting Calls. And so I find out things through them. I think I may have even found the first time I worked with you through that.
Yes.
Then there's playbill.com, which has a job section, which has been very invaluable. I've gotten a lot of work through them. And where are my other ones here? So Backstage, Actors Access, Casting Networks, the Facebook ones. I can't read my chicken scratch here, but and then referrals. So like different people that I've worked with, whether they were actors or directors or producers, who have said like, hey, here's this thing, would love to have you. Yeah. So checking those daily, and you know, I have a thing that I throw into every single submission that I have. It's my canned thank you for your consideration, my website, my links for my reels, It gets the stuff out of the way because they're going to ask me for that if they're interested in it anyway.
Hmm.
So you're just kind of always going and always checking those things for your next opportunity.
Do you have an agent, or have you been just doing a lot of this stuff on your own?
I do have an agent now, but I did not until recently, and I was really hesitant. I get a lot of, as most professional or most working actors do, I get a lot of proposals from sketchy places. They go, oh, okay, this guy's got visibility. They're trying to do something, um, and you can spot them a mile away once you've been doing it for a while. But you know, even Instagram, like this 30-day actors challenge I've been doing, I've been getting all kinds of people getting a hold of me saying, hey, we can help you boost your Instagram followers. And it happens so much. And that's not why I use Instagram. I certainly want to be out there and want to be known, but I want to be real. And so with regard to agencies, my friends who've been doing this longer than me, my union friends who have had multiple agents, have said you're always your own agent no matter who you get. So you have to do the work even once you've got a representation, but they can open doors that you can't. And that's the benefit of having an agent. So my agent so far has gotten me nothing, because right after I signed, I mean, within 4 weeks, we had the quarantine.
Okay.
So I don't anticipate my agent getting me anything. It's good to know she's there, and I hope she does get me stuff, but I have to pretend she's not even there because I still have to do all my work.
Explain what a typical week is like for you leading up to a shoot or a theatrical production.
So first of all, Kiana, there is no typical in an actor's life. That does not exist. But leading up to it, that's what's interesting, is leading up to a shoot and leading up to a theatrical production are just different worlds. So, you know, I've had some shoots for, even for films where we didn't rehearse at all. Like, I got to the set, my acting partners and I worked on our scenes on our own time, and it was ready for director to yell action. I mean, it was like that. Then I've had others where the director was much more thoughtful and wanted to get the best out of us and said, let's run this a few times. Because there's nothing more important than rehearsing, if you want to do well. So, and that's the benefit of having a theater background, is you learn how important all that is. With theater, the week before is always tech week. And in tech week, you are owned by the show. You have no life outside of it. The exception is, if you have a smaller cast, you've worked together so intimately, the director and your acting partner or partners, that there's so much just understood. So you don't always need to beat yourself and beat the show into the ground leading up to the first performance, because you've been doing it for a while. So, you know, for the average sized play, tech week involves rehearsal every day, cue to cue, different parts of tech rehearsal. And maybe fitting in a couple of shifts at my survival gig because I don't have rehearsal during the day. But there's really nothing typical about my life, unfortunately.
Are there particular things that you do or routines that you have to prepare yourself when you go into casting calls?
Yeah, sometimes we can be a little, obviously not lazy based on everything I just said about being a working actor, but we can kind of rest on, well, I've got these monologues, no matter what they ask me for, I've got something, and so you don't memorize new monologues. Not a good practice. So every now and then what I will do is dust off the monologue when I'm in a different emotional state, or if I'm in a very, very bizarre, out of the norm setting. And so, like, you know, a telemarketer just called me again, and now I'm angry. So I get done with them, and I'm like, what about that monologue feeling like this? And so I work on the monologue from a very, like, an emotion and a standpoint that has nothing to do with what the actual monologue is, but it helps you find new stuff. So I try to do that on a regular basis, but leading up to the actual audition or casting call, the main thing is that I just I know I have this. I mean, and I go to so many auditions that I can't get hung up with anyone in particular. So I relax, I breathe, and I just go in there ready to have a lot of fun doing what I know I'm good at, and have fun with it in front of somebody. Just there you go. And if you want to talk more after, great. That's like, I don't say that, but if that's my thought process, if they want to talk more after, awesome. But mainly, I'm just going to go have fun in front of people. So,
What are some of the funny and or stressful things that happen in your line of work?
let me look at where this is on your list here.
Number 7, I think.
Okay. Okay. Um, so one of the first ones that comes to mind was so random, but we did a musical called Assassins by Stephen Sondheim. A group of us. It was an amazing production. The director won best show, best director award that year there at the local theater awards thing. And it was a great production, very intense, very dark. And there was just one rehearsal where we had to work on the scene where my character is ready to throw a bottle at this other character's head, but stops himself. He just can't do it. This Leon Czolgosz was a bottle maker back in the day, and so he was Charles Gateau said, like, if you lose your job, just get another one, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I make 6 cents an hour, like, who are you? And so I take this bottle, I'm about to throw it at his head, and instead I don't. And then and then this other character, he says, throw the bottle. What are you doing? Throw the bottle. And I can't. So he takes it from me and throws it off stage. Well, this one rehearsal during tech, it pelts the stagehand right in the forehead. It was supposed to land in this soft cushioned hole that we had built so that you couldn't hear the bottle when it was thrown off stage. And instead it hit her right in the forehead. It was like almost a golf ball sized bump on her head. So it was one of the stories that came to mind when you said funny or stressful things, that it's kind of funny and not thing that happened. Yeah, she ended up fine, but it was certainly scary for everybody. And like, rehearsal came to a halt for about 30 minutes while we assessed her situation. And so there's that one.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. And then there's also when I've been on shoots where it's been freezing cold outside, but the scene is not in the winter, so you have to pretend you're not cold. And wow, is that tough. And plus, when it's cold weather for me, it's just, my nose becomes a faucet. My nose runs when it's freezing cold outside. So and like knowing they're gonna have to edit those sniffles out of it. And so there's that. And then also, like, what was it? End of last year, I did a Kreutzer Sonata. It was a play, Jewish coming of age story. I get cast as a Jewish dad frequently. And so I had also been asked to submit something for a Facebook holiday message to the tune of everybody's favorite song to hate over the holidays, which is Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas. So I did this wild thing right here in my room, just crazy, like, singing along to it. And they said, oh my God, that was fantastic. Can you send us another one with more people maybe? So everybody in our Jewish themed play that was available said, this is great. And we were in, what was it called? Lindenhurst out on Long Island. Mm-hmm. And when you get off the train, they had this amazing, like a little tiny little park, but with an amazing Christmas display. So we got in front of that, and it was freezing outside, and we were getting ready to do a Jewish play, and we're singing Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas. And, I'm leaving out tons and tons of stuff, but there are so many funny and stressful things that are just part of life when you do this.
Can you tell us some interesting or odd pretend jobs that you've had as an actor?
Yeah. So, I use that so much on Instagram. I'll say, today's pretend job, whatever, bartender. But I've had so many not peculiar or odd pretend jobs. But I did write down something for myself. Oh, okay. Before I got into acting and I was in burlesque, I worked. It's called BHOF. It's the biggest thing that happens in that industry every year in Vegas. So everybody comes, burlesque performers from all over the world come there for this one weekend. And so I worked BHOF the one weekend. And in theater, I would have been called a stagehand. If I was a female, I would have been called, oh shoot, what do we call them? Stage kitten. And I forget, we came up with, there was a generally understood name for the males that did it. I forget what it was, but one of the default names you give us is stripper picker upper. So that was probably one of the more interesting titles, stripper picker upper. But then also, I was in a movie that the name is a curse word, so I can't say it, I guess, but it's SH blank T head is the name of the movie.
Yeah.
So, and it was the first film or second film I ever got cast in, something like that. Just a featured supporting role. I have one line, but but when I got there, it was clear to the director that I could do more than that, but he couldn't write new stuff into the script for somebody who's not a main character. Mm-hmm. So he just threw me into this concert scene, but I'm a juggalo, if you know what that is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm all painted up, and it was like 10 hours of mosh pit energy dancing, going crazy. I was a workout. I mean, I was exhausted after that, and you could really feel it. So stripper picker upper, juggalo, and then yeah, I mean, there's just so many normal roles I've had. I have stories I can tell, but they're not because the roles were interesting. It's because of the situation.
Oftentimes, what do you find yourself casted as most often? I know you mentioned as a Jewish dad. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other roles that you find that people like to typecast you?
Yeah, and which is, it's a really important topic, or part of this topic is knowing your type. Because when I first started to go to a lot of auditions and cattle call auditions, I was using monologues that were not my type. They were from, I felt them from my own truth, my own experiences. There's a movie, I think it's called Alfie, maybe. I forget if that was it, but it had Michael Caine, and there was a remake that had Jude Law, I believe. But he's a player, and you wouldn't know it now, but back in the day, I used to have a lot of fun with the ladies, and so and I was not interested in settling down. So it was just lots of different experiences. So yeah, I'm embarrassing myself now. So what was your question?
That was the monologue. You would use that monologue a lot?
Right. Yeah. So I used that monologue, not a lot, but I used it once, and I was fortunate enough to get feedback from the person watching it, one of the people watching it, and she said, "You have no business with that monologue. It was creepy." Yeah, it was, and I'm like, "But I've been that." And yeah, but you don't look like that, and so you need to think about that. She said, "You need to be going for roles like professor, doctor, dad." Like, she just started. And I'm like, I was a little bit hurt because I felt like I was doing the thing I should be doing. She was absolutely right. And so once I started to think about my type from an objective viewpoint instead of a subjective viewpoint, I started getting role after role. So my types, and not that you want to only be cast in your types, mm-hmm. but think about like Paul Giamatti, who's not a conventionally attractive man. He's one of the best actors we have. He's a portly, losing his hair guy. And so, but he did so many, he was typecast so many times that he went with it, and people started to recognize this is an incredibly talented janitor. This is an incredibly talented XYZ person. He could do a lot more than these roles. And so he starts to get lead roles, and now he's one of the biggest stars out there. So, so I get cast a lot as professor, dad, doctor, Jewish dad for sure. Lots of times Eastern European, because without the hair here and the glasses in my head, I look Russian or Polish. So I get cast as the villain in lots of things, which has really been helpful for me to work on improving those accents. And what else? Husband, yeah. But I also get the more standout type things too. I have to think about what some of the recent ones were. I was a lawyer. Oh, and then also I get cast for more naturalistic things. So I have a show coming up on Disney Plus sometime this year. They've been pushing it back. I don't know why, but it's called The Big Fib. Actually, I'm not supposed to talk about that. So edit that one out. Yeah, I can't talk about it till they air it. But I've had some more standout things that where I had to be more naturalistic and more a version of myself in a conversation than taking on a role.
So I also noticed you've done quite a bit of things with, I believe it's investigation discovery.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that you've been able to, kind of build kind of a vault of work with them? Is it the particular director that keeps calling you back, or
I initially got
roles
cast,
that you're able to do?
yeah, I initially got cast in a TV show that I'm a recurring character in called Thespian, which shoots down in Baltimore. And so I think one of the ways what did I get down there first? I don't remember what I got down there first, but I think it might've been Thespian, which kind of plugged me into we call the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. So it plugged me into the DMV scene. And then because Investigation Discovery was stationed down there, Discovery moved everything up here. There were all these episodics that we call them episodics. So for instance, I was cast as the lead in the one show. It was called Evil Talks, Chilling Confessions. But in an episodic, you're called guest star. So the great thing about the ID channel is that they give you, there are so many companies where they have to turn out so many of these shows. It's insane how many shows are on Investigation Discovery, and they're all basically the same show. But anyway, the episodics are a great way to build your resume up. And because I had established a network down there, I just ended up getting cast in a number of shows.
Can you tell us some interesting things about being an actor or being a member of the creative arts community that the average person would not know?
So one of the first things that comes to mind is, I don't think a lot of people would assume that many of us are introverts, and I am not. I'm kind of a balanced, like I need people, but if I get too much people, which happens a lot in New York, and especially if you're an actor, then I need me time. I need to just shut the world out. I need some peace and quiet to be alone with my own stuff. So I just need a balance. Introverts are people that you would say they need more alone time than anything else. But there are so many extroverted introverts in our field. They need, there's a specific thing. We actors, we are so different from each other in so many ways. We come from every walk of life, but we have this one thing in particular in common, and that's this overwhelming need to express ourselves in front of people. It's kind of bizarre when you think about it. And so some of those people are introverts, where they have that thing that we have, but as soon as they walk off the stage or the director yells cut, like they don't even need to interact with anybody else. They just go back to their little hole until it's time to shoot again. Or I don't think most people would assume that if they're not in the arts or in the community. The other thing is, because we come from many different walks of life, I think there's a misconception that politically that everybody is a leftist. They are not. I am a leftist, which is why I know there are so many non-leftists. There are people who think they're leftists, and they are not leftists. Leftist, right here. So that's the other thing. And I think I had one more thing written down. Introvert, extrovert, not all left. Multi. Oh, yeah. There's so many big stars that are on TV or in the movies that that most people think, oh, they're, well, one thing is they think, oh, that looks so easy. Anybody could be an actor. Only when you're really good can you make it look that easy in anything, not just acting. But the other thing is you wouldn't know that such and such actor on your favorite TV show is also an amazing pianist and can belt, an aria at the drop of a dime. And we have to learn to be good at so many different types of art and expression. But oftentimes you get chosen for just this one little particular thing. I think most people wouldn't realize that about half the people they watch. So.
What has been one of your favorite roles thus far? Like one of the roles that have stood out? This is kind of off the cuff question.
Yeah. So I have a favorite role. It was playing Reverend John Hale in Arthur Miller's The Crucible. Because that man went through, he was one of the characters, and there were a lot, but he was one of the characters that was written pretty much verbatim from the historical findings that Arthur Miller got. The guy even wrote a book about it, about his life. He goes through so many emotions. I charted it over the course of all the acts, and I went through, in the average act, I went through, not through, but sometimes back and forth from 30 different emotions. It was so much he was going through, starting off cocksure and like, I've already rid the devil from one town, the witches are gone. Now I'm going to go to another town and get rid of the witches here because I'm really good at this. And so he starts off like that, and then finds that what he's helping create, which is this hysteria about something that maybe isn't real, has overwhelmed the population. And the population is now looking for any excuse that someone might be a witch, which in today's world would be terrorist or whatever. So there's that mindset that happens. And I got to, I start off the play all proud and sure and ignorantly proud, egoic, and I end literally on my hands and knees in tears because of what I've created. So it's going to be hard to top that one. But the second one would be, I was in a production of, the first production of the Me Too plays at the end of 2018. And I got to basically do a 25-minute monologue about a real story about the playwright's lifelong history of sexual abuse.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, once again, like just getting to say so many things and say it in a way that won't bore people for 25 minutes is an art. And it was beautiful. And that playwright and I are now very good friends. So anyway, I'm talking a lot.
For students who want to pursue or research about a career in acting, what are the resources that you would suggest that they look into?
The number one thing is get involved in a community theater. You will not learn anything more than just jumping in and doing it. I equate it with bartending, which I used to do. You can study what all the drinks are, memorize what's in them, but you have to be back behind a bar on a Saturday night in the mix of it to actually learn what bartending is. And that's acting. So get involved in a community theater, immerse yourself in that world, because whether you're a stagehand or helping with the handing out the programs, whatever you're doing, and this is in life in general, just if you're in that world, you will by osmosis pick up so much stuff that will help you. It might even be just watching how a director and an actor work together and go, not even conscious of it. But then later when you get cast in a role, now you're thinking about that when you're talking to your director. So just do it. Get involved in a community theater. Yeah, that's basically, that's what I would say. Do community theater.
And then lastly, what is your best piece of career advice that you would give to your younger self?
Think highly enough of yourself that you don't let your ego run the show.
Nice. Nice. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story in acting. Maybe next time we can catch you on directing and producing.
Maybe.
For those who want to tune in with us at 4 o'clock, we're going to teach you about engineering the next big hit with recording engineer James Kane. Thank you so much. Ciao.
Bye.